You ever hear how humans used to fight wars? Kralzoth asked, mandibles clicking with nervous energy as he polished his plasma rifle. Lieutenant Vexnar looked up from his equipment check, all four eyes blinking in sequence, his species equivalent of an eye roll. Is this another one of your horror stories, because I just ate? No, seriously. Kralzoth's exoskeletal plates shimmered with excitement. You know Sergeant Donovan, the human liaison assigned to our battalion? The one who keeps making those awful puns about how many arms we have? Yeah, I know him. Well, I was on guard duty with him last cycle, and he was telling me about how humans fought before they joined the Galactic Confederation. Let me guess. Vexinar's voice dripped with sarcasm. They were barbaric savages who ate their enemies' hearts to gain their courage. Worse. Kralzoth leaned in, lowering his voice despite the fact they were alone in the armory. They used to stab each other, with metal. Metal, like actual physical blades? Vexinar's antennae twitched in disbelief. That's just propaganda. No spacefaring species would— It gets worse, Kralzoth interrupted. They had these things called bayonets. Basically a gun with a knife attached to the end. So if they ran out of bullets, they'd just run at the enemy and stab them. Vexinar's carapace paled slightly. That can't be true. Oh, it is. Donovan showed me historical footage. And you know what? They're proud of it. Commander Throwbacks of the 5th Galactic Marine Division rubbed his eye stalks tiredly as he surveyed the assembled officers in the briefing room. His exoskeletal plates were dull with fatigue, having spent the last 3 solar cycles coordinating defensive measures against the Vorlax incursion in the Gliza sector. Status report, he clicked, his translator converting the sound into standard galactic for the benefit of the few non-Artheran officers present. Among them stood Staff Sergeant James Donovan, the only human in the room. At just under 2 meters tall, he was neither the largest nor the smallest being present, but there was something about him that always made Throwbacks uneasy. Perhaps it was the way those flat teeth showed when he smiled. A bizarre evolutionary trait that simultaneously signaled both friendliness and aggression in his species. Lieutenant Vexinar stepped forward, mandibles clicking anxiously. Sir, the Vorlax have taken the Proxima outpost. We've lost contact with all 3,000 colonists. A murmur of distress rippled through the assembled officers. The Vorlax were a relatively new threat. Crystalline entities that consumed organic matter to fuel their reproduction. What made them particularly terrifying was their ability to process and utilize the neural patterns of those they consumed, effectively gaining the knowledge and skills of their victims. Casualties? Throwbacks asked, though he already knew the answer. Total, sir, Vexnar replied grimly. The Vorlax don't leave survivors. Donovan cleared his throat, the sound jarringly mammalian in the room full of chitinous beings. Commander, if I may? Throwbacks gestured with a pincer, granting permission to speak. We've been fighting defensively since this conflict began, Donovan said, his voice carrying that peculiar human quality that somehow commanded attention despite its softness. The Vorlax are predictable. They consume, they replicate, they advance, but they've never faced humans before. What are you suggesting, Sergeant? Throwbacks asked, all 4 of his eye stalks focusing on the human. Donovan smiled, showing those flat, herbivore-like teeth that had evolved for an omnivorous diet. I'm suggesting we show them why the Galactic Confederation was so eager to bring humanity into the fold, sir. 4 solar cycles later, Kralzoth found himself crouched behind a barricade of rapidly assembled nanopolymer, trying not to think about the fact that the crystalline entities advancing toward their position had once been his fellow soldiers. Beside him, Sergeant Donovan was calmly checking his modified Confederation pulse rifle, whistling a tune that the human called an old war ditty. How can you be so calm? Kralzoth chittered, his mandibles clicking rapidly in distress. Those were our comrades yesterday. Donovan stopped whistling and gave Kralzoth a look that the Artheran had learned to recognize as sympathetic. They're not your comrades anymore, buddy. They're Vorlax now, and we're about to introduce them to a uniquely human concept. What's that? Kralzoth asked, grateful for any distraction from the approaching horror. Booby traps, Donovan said with a grin, just as the first wave of crystalline entities stepped onto the battlefield. What happened next would forever change Kralzoth's understanding of warfare, and of humans in particular. The ground erupted in a series of precisely calculated explosions, sending crystalline shards flying in all directions. But unlike previous encounters with the Vorlax, where conventional energy weapons had merely slowed their advance, these explosions were followed by a viscous substance that clung to the crystalline structures, melting them on contact. What is that? Kralzoth asked in awe. Napalm, Donovan answered casually, as if discussing the weather. Well, a space-age version of it anyway. The Vorlax absorb energy weapons to power themselves, so we needed something a bit more primitive. Primitive? Kralzoth echoed, watching as the advancing Vorlax line dissolved into puddles of molten crystal. Chemical warfare, Donovan explained, rising from behind the barricade to fire precise shots at the few Vorlax that had survived the initial trap. Humans have been perfecting it for centuries. The Confederation banned most of it, of course, but they made an exception for the Vorlax. But how did you know it would work? Donovan's expression darkened momentarily. Because we've tried every possible way to kill each other over our history. If there's one thing humans understand better than anyone else in the galaxy, it's how to destroy things. Before Kralzoth could process this disturbing statement, his comm unit crackled to life with Commander Throwbacks' voice. All units, Phase 2 is active. Fall back to secondary positions. As they retreated according to plan, Kralzoth couldn't help but notice the grim satisfaction on Donovan's face. What's Phase 2? He dared to ask. Something we humans call shock and awe, Donovan replied, just as the sky behind them lit up with a blinding light. So let me get this straight, Vexnar said, his mandibles working overtime as he processed what Kralzoth was telling him. The humans deliberately crashed a small asteroid into the Vorlax main force? Not an asteroid, Kralzoth corrected, still unable to believe what he had witnessed. An obsolete human colony ship, stripped of everything useful and filled with something Donovan called ANFO, some kind of mining explosive. They calculated the exact trajectory needed to hit the Vorlax concentration without endangering our forces. They were sitting in the mess hall of the GCS Implacable, the Confederation flagship that had arrived just hours after the battle. The mood throughout the ship was one of cautious celebration, the first decisive victory against the Vorlax since the conflict began. But that's... Vexnar struggled to find the words. That's barbaric. That's effective, countered a new voice. Both Arthurans turned to see Staff Sergeant Donovan standing there, tray in hand. Mind if I join you? Without waiting for an answer, the human sat down, immediately digging into what the ship's synthesizers had approximated as meatloaf, a concept that both fascinated and repulsed the Arthurans. Kralzoth was just telling me about your tactics, Vexnar said carefully. Ah, the FOAB. Donovan nodded, using some human acronym. Father of all bombs, we called it. Crude, but effective. But the destruction, Vexnar began, was contained to the enemy force, Donovan finished firmly. 0 civilian casualties, minimal environmental impact, and most importantly, it worked. The Vorlax had never encountered anything like it. Because it's prehistoric, Vexnar exclaimed. The Confederation has banned kinetic bombardment for over 3 centuries. Donovan smiled that unsettling herbivore smile again. And that's exactly why it worked. The Vorlax have been consuming Confederation soldiers and colonists for months, absorbing all their knowledge of energy weapons and defense systems. But humans? We've got millennia of experience with ways to kill that don't involve fancy lasers or plasma. He took another bite of his meatloaf before continuing. You know what my great-great-grandfather used to hunt deer? A bow and arrow. Literal sticks with pointy ends. And it worked just fine. Kralzoth and Vexnar exchanged glances, their antennae twitching in the Arthurian expression of discomfort. Look, Donovan sighed, setting down his fork. I know how we seem to you. Humans are the new kids on the galactic block. You think we're primitive because we still remember how to fight without technology. But that's our strength, not our weakness. The Admiralty seems to agree, Kralzoth noted. I heard they're giving you a field promotion. Donovan shrugged. They want me to train a special task force. Humans and non-humans working together, combining our unique perspectives. And you want us to join? Vexnar guessed, his tone indicating he was not thrilled by the prospect. Actually, yes, Donovan replied. You both showed exceptional adaptability during the battle. That's rare among Confederation species. Is that a compliment or an insult? Vexnar clicked defensively. Neither, just an observation. Donovan pushed his tray aside. The Vorlax aren't beaten yet. They're adapting, learning. Our advantage won't last if we don't keep evolving our tactics. And by evolving, you mean regressing to even more primitive methods? Vexnar asked sarcastically. Donovan's laugh was unexpected. Maybe. Or maybe combining the best of both worlds. The Confederation has incredible technology, but you've all forgotten what it means to really fight. To adapt in the moment, to use your environment, to think like a predator. And humans remember, Kralzoth said quietly. We do, Donovan nodded, suddenly serious. God help us, we do. 2 months later, Lieutenant Vexnar found himself in a situation he would never have imagined possible. Crawling through mud on a training ground designed to replicate Earth's varied terrains, with 15 kilos of equipment strapped to his exoskeleton, while a human drill instructor screamed incomprehensible phrases at him. Move it, Bug Eyes! My grandmother could crawl faster, and she's been dead for 50 years! Beside him, Kralzoth was faring no better. His normally pristine carapace caked with soil, and what the humans called sweat, but was actually a cooling lubricant Arthurans secreted when overheated. I hate you for talking me into this, Vexnar chittered in their native language. Less talking, more crawling, the drill instructor bellowed, somehow hearing them despite the lack of a translator for their private conversation. The Special Task Force, officially designated as Unconventional Warfare Unit Alpha, but nicknamed the Throwbacks by most of the Confederation military, was comprised of 30 beings from 12 different species. What they had in common was not physical attributes, or even military specialization, but rather a willingness to learn what humans called down and dirty fighting. As Vexnar dragged himself through the final meters of mud, he reflected on how thoroughly his perception of humans had changed in just a few short months. Where once he had seen them as barely civilized newcomers to the galactic community, he now recognized a resilience and adaptability that was frankly terrifying. Humans didn't just remember their violent past, they honored it, studied it, and most disturbing of all, found ways to apply ancient techniques to modern warfare. The training regimen included everything from hand-to-hand combat, modified for various physiologies, to improvised explosives to psychological warfare. Time! Shouted the instructor as Vexnar finally hauled himself over the finish line. 8 minutes, 42 seconds. That's 2 minutes faster than yesterday, Lieutenant. Maybe there's hope for you yet. Vexnar clicked his mandibles in what humans might interpret as a smile, though it was actually closer to a grimace of exhaustion. Still, he felt an unfamiliar sensation that took him a moment to identify: pride. Later, cleaned up and resting in the barracks, Vexnar found Captain Donovan, the promotion had come through, studying holographic maps of the Cygnus sector, where Vorlax activity had recently been reported. Captain, Vexnar acknowledged, his translator converting the clicks into standard galactic. Lieutenant, Donovan nodded without looking up. Good work today. Your squad is showing real improvement. Thank you, sir. Vexnar hesitated, then asked the question that had been bothering him for weeks. May I speak freely? Now Donovan did look up, his eyes, only 2 of them, still strange to Vexnar, focusing intently. Always. Why us? Why Arthurans? We're not known for our warrior culture. The Vreks or the Taurians would have been more logical choices for your unit. Donovan leaned back, considering the question. You ever hear of the Gurkhas, Lieutenant? No, sir. They were, still are actually, a group of soldiers from a region on Earth called Nepal. Not the biggest humans, not the most technologically advanced, but pound for pound, some of the fiercest fighters Earth ever produced. Donovan's expression grew distant, reflective. During one of Earth's global conflicts, a Japanese general was asked what he thought about the Gurkhas. He said he would rather face 500 enemy soldiers than 50 Gurkhas. And this relates to Arthurans how exactly? Vexnar asked, failing to see the connection. Because it's not about where you start, it's about what you become, Donovan explained. Arthurans have several advantages. Exoskeletons that provide natural armor, excellent spatial awareness with those 4 eyes, and mandibles that can literally rip through Vorlax crystal with the right technique. But your greatest asset is your adaptability. Adaptability? Vexnar echoed, surprised. That's not a trait usually associated with my species. Isn't it? Donovan raised an eyebrow. Your people evolved on a planet with 7 distinct climate zones and adapted to all of them. Your civilization developed mathematics 3,000 years before you discovered fire. If that's not thinking outside the box, I don't know what is. Before Vexnar could respond, the ship's alert system activated, bathing the room in pulsing blue light. Attention all personnel, came Commander Throwbacks' voice over the comm. Vorlax forces have been detected approaching the Proxima colony. All units prepare for immediate deployment. This is not a drill. Donovan was on his feet instantly, the holographic maps forgotten. Looks like graduation day came early, Lieutenant. Time to see if all that mud crawling paid off. The Proxima colony hung in space like a jewel, its habitation domes gleaming in the light of the binary stars it orbited. From the bridge of the GCS Indomitable, Kralzoth could see the civilian evacuation ships departing. Not in panic, but in orderly waves, protected by Confederation escorts. This time they'd had warning. This time they were ready. Status report, Commander Throwbacks demanded, his eye stalks swiveling to take in the tactical displays. Vorlax fleet approaching from the spinward direction, reported the sensor officer, a Taurian whose forearms moved with precision across multiple control surfaces. Estimated time to engagement 17 minutes. Civilian evacuation? Throwbacks asked. 68% complete, came the response. All non-essential personnel will be clear before the Vorlax arrive. Kralzoth noticed Captain Donovan standing quietly at the tactical station, studying the Vorlax approach vector with an intensity that seemed at odds with his usual relaxed demeanor. You see it too, don't you? Donovan asked without looking up, somehow aware of Kralzoth's attention. See what, sir? Kralzoth moved closer, his own eyes scanning the display. They're not taking the most direct approach, Donovan pointed out. They're coming in at an angle that keeps the larger of the binary stars behind them from our perspective. Commander Throwbacks had overheard and joined them at the tactical station. A primitive attempt to use the star's radiation to mask their approach? Or something else entirely? Donovan mused. The Vorlax have been consuming our people for months. They've learned our tactics, our technology. He trailed off, then suddenly straightened. Commander, request permission to deploy the Throwbacks ahead of the main fleet. Throwbacks' mandibles clicked in surprise. Your unit is still in training, Captain. With respect, sir, they're ready. And I have a theory I'd like to test. For a moment, Throwbacks was silent, his compound eyes unreadable. Then, with a slight inclination of his head, permission granted, but I want a full briefing on this theory of yours before you deploy. 10 minutes later, Kralzoth found himself aboard the Unexpected, a modified Confederation shuttle that Captain Donovan had somehow requisitioned and renamed, against all Confederation naming protocols. The craft lived up to its unofficial designation as a rust bucket, an ancient human term that Kralzoth found oddly appropriate given the ship's patchwork appearance. The 12 members of the Throwbacks who had been selected for this mission were strapped into crash seats that had clearly been designed for a variety of physiologies. Lieutenant Vexnar sat across from Kralzoth, his carapace now adorned with the distinctive black and red insignia of their unit, a human skull superimposed over a stylized galaxy. This is insane. Vexnar clicked softly, his translator off to keep the conversation private. We're flying toward the Vorlax in a retrofitted garbage scow. A weaponized garbage scow, Kralzoth corrected, trying to project more confidence than he felt. And if the captain is right. If the captain is right, we might survive long enough to brag about it, Vexnar finished. If he's wrong, we'll be Vorlax food. The shuttle's intercom crackled to life with Donovan's voice. All right, Throwbacks, this is where all that painful training pays off. The Vorlax have been adapting to Confederation tactics, but they've never faced anything like us before. Remember your training, trust your instincts, and most importantly, remember that humans have a saying, the best defense is a good offense. Kralzoth felt the shuttle accelerate as Donovan finished his brief speech. Through the viewports, he could see the main Confederation fleet receding behind them as they pushed toward the approaching Vorlax ships. Captain, called the communications officer, a Solarian whose translucent skin pulsed with neural activity. We're receiving a transmission from the lead Vorlax vessel. Put it through, Donovan ordered, sounding more curious than concerned. The view screen flickered, and Kralzoth felt his hemolymph run cold at what he saw. The face that appeared was a grotesque amalgamation, partly crystalline, partly organic, with features that disturbingly resembled Commander Throwbacks. We see you, small vessel, the entity said, its voice a discordant harmony of tones. Your strategy is known to us. Your technology is known to us. Your biology will soon be part of us. Donovan stepped into view of the transmission, his expression not one of fear but of grim satisfaction. You know, that's the first time a Vorlax has ever bothered to talk to us. Guess you've been consuming enough officers to learn diplomacy. Too bad you didn't also learn when to retreat. The Vorlax Throwbacks tilted its crystalline head in what might have been confusion. Retreat is inefficient. We will consume your ship, then the colony, then your fleet. Yeah, about that, Donovan smiled that unnerving, flat-toothed smile. You've been fighting the Confederation for months now, but you haven't really fought humans yet. We do things a little differently. Without warning, Donovan cut the transmission and turned to his crew. Execute maneuver Charlie Foxtrot now! The shuttle abruptly changed course, no longer heading directly toward the Vorlax fleet, but instead accelerating on a vector that would take them around the outer edge of the formation. What are we doing? Vexnar asked, gripping his restraints as the artificial gravity struggled to compensate for the sudden change in direction. Something the Vorlax won't expect, Kralzoth replied, suddenly understanding. We're not attacking their ships at all. Indeed, as the shuttle raced along its new trajectory, Kralzoth could see through the viewport that they were now heading toward a specific point in space, a point just behind the larger of the binary stars. All hands prepare for solar transit, Donovan announced. Shields at maximum, radiation protocols in effect. Solar transit? Vexnar chittered in alarm. Is he insane? Even with shields, we'll be cooked. But Kralzoth was watching the tactical display, and he suddenly saw what Donovan had intuited earlier. The Vorlax aren't just using the star for cover. They're using it for power. Look! The display showed energy readings consistent with massive power collection. The Vorlax ships were somehow harvesting energy directly from the star. They're not just crystalline lifeforms, Kralzoth realized aloud. They're solar-powered crystalline lifeforms. That's why energy weapons don't work well against them. They absorb the energy. The shuttle shuddered as it skimmed the outer corona of the star, its shields glowing white-hot with the strain. Through the filtered viewports, Kralzoth could see massive solar collection arrays extending from the rear of each Vorlax ship, structures that hadn't been visible from the Confederation fleet's position. Targeting solution acquired, reported the weapons officer, a Vrex whose thick hide was beaded with stress moisture. But our conventional weapons won't make a dent in those arrays. We're not using conventional weapons, Donovan replied, his voice steady despite the shuttle's violent shaking. Deploy the RFGs. Kralzoth exchanged a puzzled look with Vexnar. RFGs? That hadn't been part of their training. A series of metallic thuds reverberated through the shuttle as objects were ejected from its cargo bay. On the tactical display, Kralzoth could see a dozen small signatures drifting toward the Vorlax collection arrays. What did we just launch? Vexnar asked. Rocket-propelled garbage, Donovan answered with a grin. Literally. You're firing trash at them? Vexnar's mandibles clicked in disbelief. Not just any trash, Donovan corrected. Garbage heavily laced with elements that will disrupt their crystalline structure on contact. Mostly old-fashioned cleaning chemicals, heavy metals, and a few other surprises. Think of it as a form of pollution weaponized. Before Vexnar could respond, the tactical display lit up as the first of the RFGs made contact with a Vorlax collection array. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Where the garbage struck, the crystalline structures began to discolor and deform. Direct hit, exclaimed the weapons officer. Their collection efficiency is dropping. One after another, the improvised weapons found their targets. Some of the Vorlax ships began to move, trying to reorient their arrays, but they were slow to react. Clearly, this form of attack was outside their experience. Now for Phase 2, Donovan said, keying a sequence into his console. All hands, brace for EMP deployment. A single missile launched from the shuttle's weapons bay, racing toward the center of the Vorlax formation. Unlike the garbage projectiles, this one detonated before impact, releasing not fire or shrapnel, but an expanding sphere of electromagnetic energy. The effect on the Vorlax ships was catastrophic. Already destabilized by the contaminants disrupting their crystalline structures, the sudden electromagnetic pulse caused cascading failures throughout their solar collection systems. Several smaller vessels simply went dark, drifting powerless. The larger ships' arrays began to fragment, pieces breaking off and spiraling away into space. Electromagnetic pulse? Kralzoth asked, amazed at the effectiveness of such a simple weapon. Old Earth technology, Donovan explained. The kind of thing we developed before we had energy shields or plasma weapons. The Vorlax have been consuming Confederation officers and adapting to our technology, but they've never encountered 20th century human warfare. Captain, the communications officer interrupted. We're receiving a signal from the Confederation fleet. They're moving to engage the Vorlax now that their power systems are compromised. Good, Donovan nodded. Let's get out of this solar furnace before our shields fail completely. As the shuttle banked away from the star, Kralzoth could see the main Confederation fleet advancing, their energy weapons now far more effective against the weakened Vorlax ships. What had begun as a potential massacre was turning into a decisive victory. You knew, Vexinar said quietly to Donovan as the shuttle rejoined the fleet. You knew the Vorlax were solar-powered. I suspected, Donovan corrected. Based on their attack patterns and the way they seemed to gain strength the longer battles went on. But suspecting isn't knowing. That's why we needed this mission. And the garbage weapons? Kralzoth asked. Donovan shrugged. Humans have been poisoning our own environment for centuries. We've gotten pretty good at understanding what substances disrupt biological and crystalline structures. I figured if the Vorlax could absorb energy, maybe they'd also absorb contaminants. Turns out, I was right. Vexinar's antenna twitched in the Artharan equivalent of a headshake. So your solution to an advanced alien threat was to throw garbage at them and then set off a primitive electromagnetic bomb? Hey, it worked, didn't it? Donovan grinned. Sometimes the old ways are the best ways. The celebration in the mess hall of the GCS Indomitable was subdued by Confederation standards but raucous by Artharan ones. The Throwbacks had returned as heroes, their unconventional tactics having turned the tide of what could have been a devastating defeat. Kralzoth found himself the center of attention as he recounted the mission to a group of wide-eyed junior officers, most of whom had never seen actual combat against the Vorlax. And then the captain says, sometimes the old ways are the best ways, just as casual as you please. Kralzoth finished, his mandibles clicking in amusement at the memory. Is it true they're calling you the garbage disposal unit now? Asked a young Solarian ensign, her translucent skin flushing with embarrassment as soon as the question left her mouth. That's not the official designation, Kralzoth clarified. But yes, the nickname has been floating around. Better than what they're calling the Vorlax now, Vexinar added as he joined the group. Apparently, crystal trash has become the preferred term among the human contingent. The gathered officers chittered in laughter, the tension of the past weeks finally finding release. Even Commander Trilvac, who had joined the celebration briefly to commend the Throwbacks, had seemed less rigid than usual, his formal carapace decorations slightly askew in what passed for relaxation among senior Artharan officers. Later, as the celebration wound down, Kralzoth found Captain Donovan sitting alone in a corner, nursing a drink that the human had assured him was just water. I'm still on duty. May I join you, Captain? Kralzoth asked, mandibles clicking in the formal pattern of respect. Drop the formality, Kral, Donovan said with a wave. We just threw garbage at crystalline aliens together. I think we're past standing on ceremony. Kralzoth settled his exoskeleton onto the bench across from Donovan. The Admiralty is quite impressed. I heard they're considering implementing your tactics fleet-wide. God help us all, Donovan muttered, though there was a hint of pride in his voice. Next thing you know, they'll be installing trash compactors as primary weapon systems. You don't seem as pleased as I would have expected, Kralzoth observed. We won a significant victory today. Donovan was quiet for a moment, swirling the water in his glass. We won a battle, he finally said. But the war, that's just beginning. The Vorlax are on the defensive now, Kralzoth pointed out. Their primary advantage has been neutralized. For now, Donovan agreed. But they adapt, remember? They consume, they learn, they evolve. Now they know about EMP weapons and contamination tactics. They'll develop countermeasures. And we'll develop new tactics, Kralzoth countered. That's warfare. Donovan smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. You know what the most terrifying thing about humans is, from the perspective of other species? Your ability to eat capsaicin for pleasure? Kralzoth attempted a joke, referencing the infamous hot sauce incident that had occurred during Cultural Exchange Week. That earned a genuine laugh from Donovan. Besides that, no, it's that we never stop thinking about how to kill each other, and by extension, anything else that threatens us. He leaned forward, his expression serious again. Throughout our history, every new technology, every scientific breakthrough has been applied to warfare almost immediately. The first powered aircraft flew in 1903. By 1911, planes were being used in war. The first computers were built to break enemy codes. The internet began as a military communication network. Hell, we split the atom, and 2 weeks later, we used it to obliterate 2 cities. Kralzoth's antennae drooped in discomfort. That's disturbing. It is, Donovan nodded. But it's also why the Confederation recruited us, because while you've all been enjoying millennia of relative peace, developing energy weapons and shields and faster-than-light travel, humans have been in our corner of the galaxy thinking of all the ways those technologies could be used to kill more efficiently. And yet, when faced with an enemy immune to energy weapons, you reverted to garbage, Kralzoth pointed out. Exactly. Donovan slapped the table, startling a nearby group of officers. That's the human advantage. We don't just think forward. We think backward, sideways, upside down. If a plasma rifle doesn't work, we'll try a chemical weapon. If that fails, we might try a pointy stick. Whatever gets the job done. He drained his water glass before continuing. The Confederation has been fighting the Vorlax according to established protocols, with predictable results. But humans, we're chaos incarnate. We've spent our entire history fighting each other with everything from rocks to relativistic kill vehicles. That's our edge. We're unpredictable because we'll use anything that works, regardless of how primitive or advanced it might be. Kralzoth considered this for a long moment. So the key to defeating the Vorlax is to think like humans? To be unpredictable? Not exactly. Donovan shook his head. The key is to understand that there's no single key. The moment you think you've found the perfect solution, you've already lost. Adaptation isn't just about responding to change. It's about initiating it. That sounds exhausting, Kralzoth admitted. Welcome to the human condition, Donovan replied with a wry smile. We're constantly preparing for threats that might never materialize while simultaneously creating new ones. It's a miracle we didn't wipe ourselves out before reaching the stars. And yet, here you are, Kralzoth observed, teaching the rest of us how to throw garbage at our enemies. When it works, Donovan shrugged. Speaking of which, we should get some rest. Tomorrow, we start planning for the next engagement. The Vorlax won't make the same mistake twice. 3 weeks later, Lieutenant Vexnar found himself standing on the bridge of a captured Vorlax vessel, surrounded by the crystalline architecture that had once seemed so alien and terrifying. Now, with the ship's power core removed and its neural networks deactivated, it was just another piece of impressive but ultimately comprehensible technology. Incredible, he muttered, running a pincer along a control surface that seemed to respond to his touch, despite the ship being officially dead. Careful, warned Dr. Leora Reed, the human xenobiologist who had been assigned to the study team. We still don't fully understand how deeply the Vorlax integration goes. This ship might be more alive than we think. Dr. Reed was one of the few humans who hadn't come from a military background, having joined the Confederation Scientific Corps directly from her position at something called Stanford University. Vexnar found her methodical approach refreshing after weeks of Donovan's more creative military solutions. The crystalline structures seem almost semi-organic, Vexnar noted, his scientific curiosity overriding his instinctive revulsion, as if they're grown rather than manufactured. That's precisely what fascinates me, Dr. Reed agreed, adjusting the settings on her scanner. The Vorlax don't build their ships in the conventional sense. They cultivate them, using the energy and material they've consumed to extend their consciousness into these vessel forms. So the ships are actually part of the Vorlax themselves? Vexnar's antennae twitched in alarm, in a manner of speaking. Think of it less as ships and more as exoskeletons. She glanced at him with a smile. No offense intended. None taken, Vexnar clicked, amused despite himself. But this raises disturbing implications. If the ships are extensions of Vorlax consciousness, then when we destroy them, we're killing sentient beings, yes, Dr. Reed finished grimly. Though given their predatory nature and the fact that they've consumed thousands of Confederation citizens, I think we can file this under justified self-defense. Before Vexnar could respond, his communicator chimed with an incoming transmission. Lieutenant Vexnar, he answered formally. Lieutenant, this is Captain Donovan. I need you and Dr. Reed back on the Indomitable immediately. We've detected Vorlax activity in the Tau Ceti system, and it's different. Different how? Vexnar asked, already moving toward the shuttle bay, Dr. Reed falling into step beside him. They're not attacking. Donovan's voice carried an unusual note of concern. They're building something. A lot of somethings, actually, and they're doing it fast. 30 minutes later, Vexnar and Dr. Reed stood in the Indomitable's Strategic Operations Center, staring at holographic projections of the Tau Ceti system. Specifically, at the swarm of Vorlax activity concentrated around the system's asteroid belt. What are we looking at? Commander Throwbacks demanded, all 4 of his eye stalks focused on the display. Construction, Captain Donovan replied, manipulating the hologram to zoom in on specific clusters of activity. The Vorlax are converting asteroids into... Well, we're not entirely sure yet, but they appear to be creating some kind of networked system. Dr. Reed stepped forward, her expertise clearly relevant. Based on these energy signatures, I'd say they're building collection nodes. Similar to the solar collectors we saw before, but designed to harvest energy from multiple sources simultaneously. They're adapting, Kralzoth observed from his position near the tactical display. After we disrupted their solar collection capabilities, they're diversifying their energy sources. Not just diversifying, Dr. Reed corrected, her expression troubled. Look at the configuration. They're building redundancies, distributed systems. If we take out one node, the others will compensate. So our garbage trick won't work again, Donovan concluded. As expected, but that's not what concerns me most. He adjusted the display again, highlighting a particular cluster of activity. This structure here doesn't match the others. It's not collecting energy, it's focusing it. A heavy silence fell over the operations center as the implications became clear. They're building a weapon, Commander Throwbacks stated, his mandibles clicking in the pattern that indicated deep concern. A big one, Donovan nodded. And based on the rate of construction, they'll have it operational in less than a standard week. Target? Throwbacks asked tersely. Unknown, but given their previous patterns, I'd guess a major population center. New Mars colony is the closest high-value target. Dr. Reed had moved to a different console and was rapidly inputting calculations. If this energy weapon operates on the principles I think it does, and if they've managed to adapt from what they've consumed. She paused, checking her results. It could potentially destabilize New Mars' atmospheric generators. The entire colony would be uninhabitable within hours. Evacuation isn't an option, Throwbacks noted grimly. New Mars has over 12 million colonists. We couldn't move a fraction of that number in a week. Then we stop the weapon before it's completed, Donovan said, with a conviction that made it sound simpler than everyone knew it would be. Hit them hard and fast before they can bring their defensive systems fully online. With what? Vexinar asked, gesturing at the display. You said yourself, our previous tactics won't work again. And a conventional fleet action against that many distributed targets would result in unacceptable losses. Not conventional, no, Donovan agreed. We need something new, or rather something very, very old. He turned to Commander Throwbacks. Sir, I need authorization for a high-risk operation, and I need it now. The Throwbacks are going asteroid hunting. Kralzoth had never been to Earth, but as he stood in the cargo bay of the GCS Indomitable, staring at the bizarre collection of equipment being assembled, he felt he was getting a crash course in human history, specifically the violent parts. Is that a giant spinning rock on a metal pole? He asked, mandibles clicking in confusion. Flail, corrected technical specialist Reyes, a human who had joined the Throwbacks after their initial success. Medieval weapon. Nasty business. And we're using medieval weapons against the Vorlax because of this. Reyes patted the giant metal sphere at the end of the chain. Magnetically charged depleted uranium core, wrapped in a carbon steel shell, with a nice coating of those chemical contaminants that worked so well last time. Essentially, it's a giant wrecking ball designed specifically to disrupt Vorlax crystalline structures on impact. Kralzoth's antennae twitched in disbelief. We're going to swing giant metal balls at a highly advanced alien species, building an energy weapon that could destroy an entire colony? Not just swing them, Reyes grinned. Accelerate them to about 15% of light speed using mass drivers. Like I said, medieval concept, modern execution. Across the cargo bay, similar adaptations of ancient human weapons were being prepared. Ballistic spears with molecular edge tips designed to penetrate crystalline structures. Aerosol dispersal systems that specialist Hassan had described as basically poison gas grenades, but for crystals. And most disturbing of all, a series of what looked like simple metal containers that Captain Donovan had cryptically referred to as Trojan horses. Lieutenant Vexinar approached, his carapace now bearing additional markings that designated him as the Throwbacks executive officer. Briefing in 10 minutes, he informed Kralzoth. The captain has the final operation plan ready. Does it involve more garbage? Kralzoth asked, only half joking. Worse, Vexinar replied, his mandibles clicking in what might have been amusement or anxiety. The patterns were similar in Arthurian expressions. It involves asteroids, lots of them. The briefing room was crowded with the 30 members of the Throwbacks plus key staff from the Indomitable. As Captain Donovan took his position at the tactical display, Kralzoth noticed Dr. Reed sitting quietly in the corner, her expression suggesting she had significant reservations about whatever was about to be proposed. All right, people, Donovan began without preamble. The situation is this. The Vorlax are building what appears to be a directed energy weapon capable of rendering New Mars uninhabitable. We have approximately 6 days before it's operational. and conventional tactics won't work against their distributed network. He manipulated the holographic display to show the asteroid belt where the Vorlax were concentrating their efforts. Their advantage is adaptability through consumption. Our advantage is that humans have been thinking about how to kill things efficiently since we figured out rocks hurt when you throw them hard enough. A ripple of nervous laughter moved through the room, though the non-human personnel seemed more disturbed than amused. Our plan is threefold, Donovan continued. Phase 1. We're going to launch a series of modified asteroids directly at their construction sites. These aren't just rocks. They're delivery systems for a variety of nasty surprises, ranging from EMP devices to chemical contaminants to good old-fashioned kinetic impactors. The display shifted to show trajectories from the outer edge of the Tau Ceti system toward the Vorlax position. Phase 2. While they're dealing with the asteroid assault, the Throwbacks will deploy in 3 teams to target what we believe are the command nodes of their network. Team Alpha, led by Lieutenant Vexnar, will hit the northern cluster. Team Bravo, under my command, will take the central node. Team Charlie, led by Lieutenant Kralzoth, will target the southern cluster. Kralzoth felt his hemolymph pulse quicken at the mention of his name. A team command? He hadn't been expecting that level of responsibility. Each team will deploy our modified ancient weapon systems, tailored to disrupt Vorlax operations without triggering their adaptive defenses against energy weapons. The goal is chaos. Hit them from multiple directions with multiple types of attacks they haven't encountered before. And Phase 3? Commander Throwbacks asked from his position at the back of the room. Donovan's expression turned grim. Phase 3 is where it gets interesting. Dr. Reed, would you explain your findings? All eyes turned to the human scientist as she stood and moved to join Donovan at the display. As you know, I've been studying the captured Vorlax vessel. What we've discovered is that the Vorlax aren't just crystalline entities. They're a form of networked consciousness. Each individual crystal is part of a larger whole, sharing information and adapting collectively. She adjusted the display to show a microscopic view of Vorlax crystalline structure. However, this network has a vulnerability. When subjected to a very specific resonance frequency, the crystalline structures begin to vibrate in a way that disrupts their ability to maintain cohesion. You're talking about shattering them, Vexnar clarified, like an opera singer breaking a glass with a high note. Precisely, Dr. Reed nodded, but on a much larger scale. We've developed what we're calling a resonance cascade generator. Once placed at the heart of their network and activated, it should create a sympathetic vibration that will propagate throughout their entire crystalline structure. And make them what, shake apart? Asked Specialist Hassan. More like dissolve their network connections, Dr. Reed explained. It won't necessarily destroy them physically, but it will disrupt their shared consciousness, essentially isolating each Vorlax into an individual entity rather than a collective intelligence. Divide and conquer, Donovan summarized. Without their network, they lose their greatest advantage, the ability to adapt collectively based on shared experience. There's a catch, Dr. Reed continued, her expression serious. The generator needs to be placed at the exact center of their network to be effective. That means a direct insertion into what will undoubtedly be the most heavily defended part of their construction effort. That's Team Bravo's job, Donovan said. My team will deliver the resonance generator, while Teams Alpha and Charlie provide distractions and cut off potential reinforcements. Commander Throwbacks stepped forward, his carapace formally arranged in the Arthurian expression of grave concern. Captain Donovan, this plan involves extraordinary risk. The casualty projections must be significant. They are, Donovan acknowledged without hesitation. But the alternative is the loss of 12 million colonists on New Mars. Sometimes, Commander, the old human saying applies, greater love hath no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends. The room fell silent as the weight of the mission settled on everyone present. Kralzoth found himself studying the faces of his fellow Throwbacks, human and non-human alike. There was fear there, certainly, but also determination. In the weeks they had trained together, these disparate beings from across the galaxy had become something new. Not quite human, not quite alien, but a hybrid force that combined the best aspects of both. We deploy in 6 hours, Donovan concluded. Get your teams ready, check your equipment, and make whatever personal preparations you need to make. Dismissed. As the briefing broke up, Kralzoth found himself approached by Dr. Reed. Lieutenant, she said quietly. A word if you don't mind. They moved to a quiet corner of the room while the others filed out. What can I do for you, Doctor? Kralzoth asked. Reed hesitated, then said, I wanted you to know that the resonance generator, it's not just a weapon. It's potentially a communication tool as well. Kralzoth's antennae perked up in surprise. Communication? With the Vorlax? I was under the impression they weren't interested in talking. That may be true of the collective, Reed agreed. But individual Vorlax, we don't know. No one has ever encountered one that wasn't part of the greater network. By disrupting that network, we might create an opportunity for dialogue. Does Captain Donovan know this? He does, Reed nodded. But his priority, rightly, is stopping the weapon and protecting New Mars. I just wanted someone else to be aware of the possibility, especially someone leading one of the teams. Kralzoth considered this information carefully. Why tell me specifically? Dr. Reed smiled slightly. Because unlike many of your Arthurian colleagues, you seem genuinely curious about the Vorlax as more than just an enemy. That curiosity might be valuable if an opportunity for communication presents itself. Before Kralzoth could respond, the ship's alert system activated with a series of short pulses, the signal for all personnel to prepare for combat operations. I should join my team, Kralzoth said, mandibles clicking in the formal pattern of respectful acknowledgement. Good luck, Lieutenant, Dr. Reed replied. And remember, sometimes understanding your enemy is as powerful as defeating them. The modified Confederation shuttle designated Lucky Strike, another human naming convention that baffled Kralzoth, accelerated silently through the void of space, its stealth systems engaged to minimize detection. Behind it, visible only on the tactical display, 11 other shuttles were similarly approaching the massive Vorlax construction effort from different vectors. Team Charlie, under Kralzoth's command, consisted of 8 beings, 3 humans, 2 Artharans including himself, a Vrex heavy weapons specialist, a Solarian technical expert, and a Taurian medic. An unlikely combination under normal circumstances, but after weeks of training together in the Throwbacks, they had developed into a surprisingly cohesive unit. Southern cluster coming into visual range, reported Specialist Nakamura, the human pilot. Stealth systems holding. No indication they've detected us yet. Kralzoth moved to the viewport, his 4 eyes taking in the incredible sight before them. What had once been ordinary asteroids had been transformed into a complex network of crystalline structures, glowing with internal energy as they orbited a central hub. The Vorlax had essentially converted an entire section of the asteroid belt into a vast, interconnected organism. It's beautiful, murmured Specialist Tvek, the other Arthuran on the team. In a terrifying sort of way. Focus, Kralzoth clicked sharply. Beauty won't matter much if they complete that weapon. Phase 1 initiating, came Captain Donovan's voice over the secure comm. All teams stand by for asteroid deployment. On the tactical display, Kralzoth could see the first wave of their attack beginning. Dozens of small asteroids, carefully selected and modified by the Indomitable's engineers, were being launched from mass drivers positioned at the edge of the system. To casual observation, they would appear to be nothing more than natural debris, but each contained a nasty surprise for the Vorlax. First impacts in 3, 2, 1, Donovan counted down. Even from their position several thousand kilometers away, the impacts were visible. Flashes of light as the asteroids struck Vorlax structures, followed by larger secondary explosions as their hidden payloads detonated. They're responding, reported Nakamura, monitoring the sensor feeds. Vorlax defense systems activating. Energy signatures suggest they're deploying countermeasures. As expected, Kralzoth nodded. Phase 2 commences in 60 seconds. All team members, final equipment check. The team moved with practiced efficiency, each checking their specialized gear. Unlike conventional Confederation Marines with their standardized energy weapons, the Throwbacks were equipped with an eclectic array of devices, many based on ancient human designs but updated with modern technology. Kralzoth himself carried what Donovan had called a sonic disruptor, essentially a weapon that emitted focused sound waves at frequencies specifically calibrated to stress Vorlax crystalline structures. The science behind it was complex, but the principle was simple. Make the crystals vibrate until they cracked. Team Charlie, you are go for insertion. Donovan's voice came through again. Good hunting. Acknowledged, Kralzoth responded. Lucky Strike moving to insertion point. The shuttle accelerated, taking advantage of the chaos created by the asteroid impacts to approach their target, one of the largest structures in the southern cluster, which intelligence suggested served as a secondary command node. Detecting energy spikes, warned Nakamura. They're scanning for incoming threats. Deploy countermeasures, Kralzoth ordered. The Solarian tech specialist activated a series of small drones that launched from the shuttle, each broadcasting signals designed to confuse Vorlax sensors. Another human innovation, adapted from ancient electronic warfare techniques. "We have a clear approach to landing zone Bravo," Nakamura reported. 30 seconds to touchdown." Kralzoth turned to his team. "Remember the mission. We disable the command node, plant the disruptors, and extract. Team Alpha and Team Bravo are counting on us to keep the southern cluster occupied while they deliver the resonance generator. Questions?" There were none. These weren't raw recruits. They were specialists chosen for their skills and adaptability. Each understood their role and the stakes involved. "Touching down," Nakamura announced as the shuttle made contact with the crystalline surface of the Vorlax structure. "Magnetic clamps engaged. We have a solid lock." "Depressurizing airlock," the Taurian medic reported. "Atmosphere readings show trace elements toxic to most organic life forms. Suit integrity is critical." Kralzoth checked his environmental suit one final time. Unlike the standard Confederation marine armor, the Throwbacks had been equipped with specially designed suits, resistant to the kinds of contaminants the Vorlax were known to employ. "Airlock clear," the Taurian confirmed. "Ready for egress." "Team Charlie, deploy," Kralzoth ordered, leading the way through the airlock onto the surface of the Vorlax structure. The sensation of standing on the crystalline surface was disorienting. Despite appearing solid, there was a subtle vibration underfoot, as if the entire structure were somehow alive, which, in a sense, it was. The crystal beneath them pulsed with internal light, networks of energy flowing like blood vessels through a living organism. "Setting charges at Point Alpha," reported one of the human specialists, moving to a junction where several crystalline veins converged. "These EMP devices should disrupt their communications network." "I'm detecting movement," warned the Vrex heavy weapons specialist, his massive frame shifting to bring his weapon to bear. "Multiple signatures approaching from the north." Kralzoth activated his tactical display, which overlaid his vision with sensor data. Sure enough, several Vorlax entities were moving toward their position. Crystalline formations that vaguely resembled humanoid shapes, but with numerous asymmetrical protrusions and glowing cores. "Defensive positions," Kralzoth ordered. "Nakamura, how long until those charges are set?" 2 minutes, came the terse reply as the human worked quickly to place the disruptors at key structural points. "You have one," Kralzoth decided as the first of the Vorlax entities came into view around a crystalline outcropping. "Everyone else, prepare to engage." The Vorlax moved with an unnatural fluidity, their crystalline bodies catching and refracting the ambient light. They carried no visible weapons, but Kralzoth knew from briefings that the entities themselves were living weapons, capable of projecting energy, or reshaping their crystalline structures into deadly forms. "Remember, standard energy weapons are ineffective," Kralzoth reminded his team. "Use the specialized equipment only." The Vrex was the first to fire, his weapon launching what appeared to be a simple metal sphere toward the approaching Vorlax. On impact, the sphere exploded into a cloud of fine particulate matter, a mixture of chemicals specifically designed to interfere with the Vorlax crystalline structure. The effect was immediate. The leading Vorlax entity stumbled, its smooth movements becoming jerky as the contaminants began to disrupt its cohesion. But the others continued their advance, apparently learning from their companion's misfortune and altering their approach. "They're adapting," Kralzoth warned. "Change tactics!" He activated his sonic disruptor, aiming it at the nearest Vorlax. The weapon emitted no visible beam, but the effect was dramatic. The crystalline entity began to vibrate violently, fractures appearing across its surface before it shattered into thousands of glittering fragments. The remaining Vorlax immediately changed formation, spreading out to present smaller targets. One of them extended an appendage that reshaped itself into something resembling a weapon, from which a pulse of energy erupted toward the Taurian medic. "Energy weapons!" Kralzoth shouted in warning. "They've adapted already." The Taurian dove for cover behind a crystalline formation, the energy pulse narrowly missing him. "They're using our own technology against us," he called back. "Must have absorbed it from previous encounters." "Charges set," Nakamura announced. "Detonation in 30 seconds. Fall back to the shuttle," Kralzoth ordered. "Covering fire!" The team began a fighting retreat, using their specialized weapons to keep the advancing Vorlax at bay. The Solarian tech specialist deployed another set of drones, these designed to emit the same resonance frequencies as the sonic disruptors, creating a disorienting effect on the pursuing entities. 10 seconds to detonation, Nakamura counted down as they reached the shuttle. "Everyone inside!" As the last team member cleared the airlock, Kralzoth turned for a final look at the Vorlax structure. The crystalline entities had halted their pursuit, seemingly confused by the drone interference. But something about their behavior struck Kralzoth as odd. They weren't retreating to escape the imminent explosion. Instead, they were forming a circle, their crystalline bodies merging together into a single larger entity. "What are they doing?" Tevek asked, noticing the same phenomenon. Before Kralzoth could respond, the charges detonated. The explosion wasn't particularly large. The devices were designed for precision rather than raw destructive power, but the effect cascaded through the crystalline structure, disrupting the energy flows and sending shockwaves through the connected network. The merged Vorlax entity, however, remained intact, though visibly damaged. As the shuttle lifted off, Kralzoth watched in fascination as the entity began to repair itself, drawing energy and material from the surrounding structure. "They're getting smarter," he observed grimly, "pooling their resources to withstand our attacks." "Team Charlie to Captain Donovan," he transmitted once they were clear of the immediate area. "Southern node partially disabled. Vorlax are showing new adaptive behaviors, including energy weapons and defensive merging. Be advised, your approach may be compromised." "Acknowledged, Team Charlie," came Donovan's reply, his voice tense but controlled. "We're seeing similar adaptations here. Team Alpha reports success at the northern node. Proceed to secondary objective." "Understood," Kralzoth confirmed. "Moving to target Beta." As the shuttle changed course toward their next objective, Kralzoth studied the tactical display showing the overall battle. The asteroid barrage had caused significant disruption to the Vorlax network, but already they were reorganizing, shifting resources to repair critical systems. Team Alpha, under Lieutenant Vexinar, had successfully disabled the northern command node, and was now engaged in a running battle with pursuing Vorlax entities. Team Bravo, with Captain Donovan, was making slower progress toward the central hub where the resonance generator would need to be placed. "They're learning faster than we anticipated," Nakamura observed, echoing Kralzoth's thoughts. "The merging behavior is new." "Dr. Reed theorized they might be capable of rapid physical adaptation," Kralzoth replied. "But seeing it in action is concerning." "Sir," the Solarian tech specialist interrupted, "I'm detecting unusual energy patterns from the central hub. The Vorlax appear to be accelerating their weapon construction." Kralzoth's mandibles clicked in alarm. "How much time do we have?" "At current rates?" The Solarian checked his instruments. "Less than 3 hours before the weapon is operational." "Team Charlie to Captain Donovan," Kralzoth transmitted immediately. "We have a problem. The Vorlax are accelerating weapon construction. Estimated time to completion is now less than 3 hours. There was a pause before Donovan's reply came through, accompanied by the sound of weapons fire in the background. "Understood, Team Charlie. We're encountering heavy resistance at the central hub. The resonance generator must be placed within the next hour to be effective." "We can provide a diversion," Kralzoth offered. "Draw off some of their forces." "Negative," Donovan responded. "Stick to the plan. We need all 3 nodes disabled to ensure the resonance cascade affects the entire network." A pause, then. "But if you have any other clever ideas, now would be the time." Kralzoth considered their options as the shuttle approached their second target. The original plan had assumed they would have more time, that the Vorlax would be reacting defensively rather than accelerating their efforts. But the enemy was proving more adaptable than even human unpredictability had anticipated. That's when a conversation from weeks earlier came back to him. Something Donovan had said during training. "Sometimes the most effective weapon isn't the most advanced. It's the one your enemy doesn't expect." "I might have an idea," Kralzoth said slowly. "But it's going to require a significant deviation from the plan." "I'm listening," Donovan replied. "The Vorlax are adapting to our weapons, pooling their resources to withstand our attacks. But what if we gave them something beneficial to adapt to instead? Something they would want to absorb rather than resist?" "Like what?" Donovan asked, sounding intrigued despite the obvious pressure of his situation. "Like information," Kralzoth explained. "Dr. Reed's research suggests the Vorlax assimilate not just physical matter but information from what they consume. What if we fed them corrupted data, a computer virus essentially, that would propagate through their network when they tried to absorb it?" There was a moment of silence. Then Donovan's voice returned with new urgency. "That might actually work. We'd need something they couldn't easily identify as harmful, something that would spread through their network before they could isolate it." "Exactly," Kralzoth agreed. "And I think I know what we can use. The resonance frequency data itself, but modified to act as a carrier for a disruptive code sequence." "You're suggesting we turn the resonance generator into a Trojan horse," Donovan realized. "Let them absorb it, thinking it's valuable information, when in reality, it would trigger the resonance cascade from within their own network. Kralzoth finished. No need to fight our way to the central hub at all. Can your tech specialist pull this off? Donovan asked. Kralzoth looked to the Solarian, who was already nodding vigorously. With the right equipment, yes, but we'd need direct access to the resonance generator data and a Vorlax interface point. Team Bravo has the generator, Donovan said, and we're pinned down near what appears to be a major Vorlax data node. If you can reach our position, we might be able to make this work. Changing course now, Kralzoth decided. Team Charlie to Team Alpha. Lieutenant Vexnar, we're altering the plan. Can you complete the northern and southern node objectives without us? It'll be tight, came Vexnar's reply. But we can manage. What are you planning? Something very human, Kralzoth replied, with a click of his mandibles that approximated a grim smile. We're going to trick the Vorlax into defeating themselves. The integration of Team Charlie with Team Bravo was not smooth. By the time Kralzoth's shuttle reached Donovan's position, the human captain and his team were entrenched in a defensive position, surrounded by advancing Vorlax entities that had adapted to most of their weapons. Welcome to the party, Donovan greeted as Kralzoth and his team rushed from their shuttle into the relative safety of the barricade Bravo team had established. Hope you brought something useful. We brought brains, Kralzoth replied, gesturing to the Solarian tech specialist, and a plan that doesn't involve suicide by crystal. The combined teams quickly established a perimeter, while Donovan, Kralzoth, and the Solarian examined the resonance generator, a deceptively simple-looking device about the size of an Arthurian egg clutch. The principle is sound, the Solarian confirmed after studying the generator's specifications. If I can modify the resonance pattern to serve as a carrier wave for a disruptive code sequence, the Vorlax should absorb it thinking it's valuable tactical data. How long? Donovan asked, ducking as a shard of crystal whistled overhead. A new Vorlax projectile weapon they had developed during the battle. 20 minutes, the Solarian estimated. Maybe less if I don't have to dodge crystalline death while working. You'll get your 20 minutes, Donovan assured him, then turned to organize the defense. All personnel form a perimeter. Nothing gets within 10 meters of our position. Use all remaining specialized weapons. As the teams repositioned, Kralzoth found himself side by side with Donovan at the barricade, both firing their weapons at advancing Vorlax entities. Your plan is insane, Donovan commented as he launched another chemical projectile into a cluster of Vorlax. Using their own adaptive nature against them. I wish I'd thought of it. I learned from the best, Kralzoth replied, his sonic disruptor causing a smaller Vorlax to shatter. Humans don't have a monopoly on creative thinking, you know. Donovan grinned. Never said we did. But you have to admit we excel at it. Perhaps, Kralzoth allowed, though I sometimes wonder if it's creativity or simply desperation born from millennia of fighting each other. 6 of one, half dozen of the other, Donovan replied with a shrug. Necessity is the mother of invention, and humans have been really good at making necessity for ourselves. Their conversation was interrupted by a particularly large Vorlax entity that emerged from behind a crystalline formation, its body pulsing with accumulated energy. Down! Donovan shouted, tackling Kralzoth just as the entity released a wave of energy that washed over their position, shorting out several pieces of equipment and leaving a scorched mark on the barricade. They're getting stronger, Kralzoth observed as they regained their position, absorbing our attacks and turning them back on us. Which makes your plan our only shot, Donovan agreed. How's our tech wizard doing? The Solarian looked up from his work, his translucent skin pulsing with neural activity. 70% complete. The carrier wave is stable, but I'm having trouble with the propagation algorithm. The Vorlax network is more complex than we thought. Simplify it, Kralzoth suggested. We don't need it to be elegant, just effective. Inelegant solutions are a human specialty, Donovan added with a wry smile. Sometimes a sledgehammer works better than a scalpel. The Solarian nodded and returned to his work while the rest of the combined teams continued to hold off the increasingly adaptive Vorlax forces. Their specialized weapons were becoming less effective with each encounter, as the crystalline entities learned and evolved their defenses. We're running out of tricks, Nakamura called from her position, where she had just deployed their last chemical dispersal bomb. And they're running out of things to adapt to. Which means they'll get overconfident, Donovan replied. Perfect for our trap. He turned to the Solarian. Status? 95%, came the reply. Final integration sequence running now. As if sensing the impending threat, the Vorlax attack intensified. Multiple entities converged from different directions, their crystalline bodies pulsing with accumulated energy. Some had adapted to form shield-like structures that deflected the sonic weapons, while others had developed projectile capabilities that launched crystalline shards with deadly accuracy. Modification complete, the Solarian announced. The resonance generator is now a carrier for the disruptive code, but we still need to get the Vorlax to absorb it. They absorb information and energy, right? Donovan asked. So let's give them something too tempting to resist. He took the modified generator from the Solarian and quickly attached it to his suit's power supply. I'm going to overcharge this thing, make it pulse with enough energy that they'll want to consume it immediately. Captain, that's too dangerous, Kralzoth objected. The power surge could destabilize the device or even trigger a premature resonance cascade. Got a better idea? Donovan asked, already making the connections. Because we're about to be overrun, and this needs to work now. Before Kralzoth could respond, the largest Vorlax entity they had yet encountered emerged from the crystalline landscape. Unlike the others, this one had a distinctly humanoid shape, its features eerily reminiscent of Commander Throwbacks. They've consumed high-ranking officers, Kralzoth realized with horror. That's how they've been adapting so quickly. They have access to Confederation tactical knowledge. The Throwbacks Vorlax entity regarded them with glowing crystalline eyes. Your resistance is inefficient, it said in a voice that was a disturbing approximation of the commander's clicking speech patterns. Your biological limitations cannot overcome our adaptive capacity. Submit to consumption and contribute to our perfection. How about you consume this instead? Donovan called back, standing up with the now glowing resonance generator held high. Advanced Confederation technology ripe for the taking. The Vorlax entity's attention fixed on the pulsing device, its crystalline structure shifting as if in anticipation. Energy signature detected. Technology assessment. Valuable. Captain, what are you doing? Kralzoth hissed. Creating a target they can't resist, Donovan replied quietly. When I give the signal, everyone fall back to the shuttles. This is going to get messy. The Throwbacks Vorlax began to advance toward Donovan, its crystalline body resonating with the energy signature of the generator. Behind it, other Vorlax entities converged, drawn by the promising energy source. That's right, Donovan murmured, backing up slowly. Come and get it, you overgrown wind chimes. When the lead entity was just meters away, Donovan suddenly hurled the generator directly at it. The Vorlax reflexively caught the device, its crystalline structure immediately beginning to absorb and analyze the technology. Now, Donovan shouted. Everyone fall back! The combined teams broke from their defensive positions, racing toward the waiting shuttles as the Vorlax clustered around their leader, all attention focused on the captured device. Kralzoth reached the shuttle entrance, then turned back to see Donovan still at the perimeter, watching the Vorlax. Captain! We need to go. Donovan held up a hand, eyes fixed on the crystalline entities. Wait for it. The Throwbacks Vorlax had fully incorporated the generator into its structure now, the device's glow spreading throughout its crystalline body and beginning to pulse in a rhythmic pattern. The pulse spread to the surrounding entities, then further into the connected network, a wave of resonance propagating through the entire Vorlax construction. There, Donovan said with satisfaction, finally turning to run for the shuttle. Virus delivered. As the shuttles lifted off, Kralzoth watched through the viewport as the resonance effect began to intensify. The Vorlax structures were vibrating now, the smooth crystalline surfaces developing fracture lines that spread like cracks in ice. The central Throwbacks entity was the first to shatter, exploding into countless glittering fragments that themselves began to vibrate and crack. It's working, the Solarian confirmed, monitoring the readings. The resonance cascade is propagating through their entire network. Estimated coverage, 87% and rising. Team Charlie to Team Alpha, Kralzoth transmitted. Lieutenant Vexnar, mission accomplished. The resonance cascade is underway. What's your status? We're clear of the northern node, came Vexnar's reply, and observing similar effects here. The Vorlax structures are breaking apart. Whatever you did, it worked. As their shuttle gained distance, the view through the viewport became even more spectacular. The entire Vorlax network was now visibly shaking, pulses of energy racing through the crystalline structures before they shattered in sequence, like dominoes falling in 3 dimensions. Beautiful, Nakamura murmured, in a terrifying sort of way. All teams return to the Indomitable, came Commander Throwbacks' voice over the comm. Long-range sensors confirm the Vorlax weapon is destabilizing. Mission successful. The journey back to the Confederation flagship was conducted in exhausted silence, each member of the teams processing what they had just experienced. Kralzoth found himself seated beside Captain Donovan, who was staring at his hands with an expression the Arthurian couldn't quite interpret. "Something wrong, Captain?" he asked. Donovan looked up, his expression clearing. "Just thinking. We won today, but the Vorlax will be back. They'll adapt to even this." "Perhaps," Kralzoth agreed. "But so will we." "That's what worries me," Donovan admitted quietly. "Where does it end? They adapt. We adapt to their adaptations. They adapt to our adaptations of their adaptations. It's an arms race with no finish line." "Unless," Kralzoth began, then hesitated. "Unless what?" "Unless Dr. Reed was right," Kralzoth said, "about the possibility of communication. The resonance cascade didn't destroy the Vorlax. It disrupted their network. What if the individual entities, separated from the collective, are different? What if they could be reasoned with?" Donovan considered this for a long moment. "That's not a very human thought, Kral. Our history suggests that when we can't communicate with something that threatens us, we destroy it." "But you're not just human anymore," Kralzoth pointed out. "You're part of the Confederation now, and we've learned from you about adapting, about thinking creatively. Perhaps you could learn something from us as well." "Like what?" "Patience, curiosity, the willingness to see beyond immediate threats to longer-term possibilities." Donovan smiled faintly. "You know, when I first joined the Confederation forces, I thought I was here to teach you all how to fight. Never occurred to me I might be here to learn how not to." 1 month later, Kralzoth stood in the observation lounge of the GCS Indomitable, watching as a small, crystalline entity floated in a specially designed containment field. The entity, no larger than his forearm, pulsed with inner light but made no aggressive movements. "It's been like that for 3 weeks now," Dr. Reed said, joining him at the viewport, "ever since we isolated it from the debris of the Tau Ceti engagement." "Has it tried to communicate?" Kralzoth asked. "In its way," Reed nodded. "It responds to certain stimuli, particularly resonance patterns. We've established a rudimentary form of exchange. Not quite language, but definitely communication." "And what have you learned?" Reed's expression was thoughtful. "That the Vorlax aren't what we thought they were. This individual entity isn't inherently aggressive. It's curious, adaptive, but not necessarily hostile." "Then why did they attack Confederation colonies?" "It's the network," Reed explained. "When connected, the Vorlax operate with a hive mentality focused solely on growth and consumption. Individual Vorlax appear to have more personality, for lack of a better term, more flexibility of thought." Captain Donovan entered the observation lounge, accompanied by Lieutenant Vexnar. Both wore the new insignia of the recently formalized Unconventional Warfare Division, which had expanded beyond the original Throwbacks to include 6 full companies. "Admiring our guest?" Donovan asked, nodding toward the contained Vorlax. "Wondering about it," Kralzoth corrected. Dr. Reed was just explaining her theories about individual Vorlax versus the collective. "The Admiralty is interested," Vexnar added. "They're considering a new approach to the Vorlax situation. Containment and isolation rather than destruction. Keep them separated so they can't form the network. From exterminators to zookeepers," Donovan mused. "Not sure if that's progress or just a different kind of problem." "It's an opportunity," Reed insisted. "A chance to understand a truly alien intelligence, maybe even find a way to coexist." "Speaking of opportunities," Donovan changed the subject. "I have news. The UWD is being assigned a ship, our own command, independent of the regular fleet structure, and I want you all as my senior staff." "All of us?" Kralzoth's antennae perked up in surprise. "The original Throwbacks have earned it," Donovan confirmed. "Vexnar as XO, you as tactical officer. Dr. Reed heading up a new xenobiology division focused on the Vorlax and other non-standard life forms." "What's the mission?" Reed asked. "Exploration and first contact with a site of crisis response," Donovan explained. "The Admiralty recognizes that conventional approaches don't always work with unconventional situations. They want a ship that can handle the weird stuff. And they think the weird humans are the ones to do it." Vexnar clicked in amusement. "Not just humans," Donovan corrected. "That's the point. What made the Throwbacks effective wasn't just human unpredictability. It was the combination of different perspectives. Humans, Arthurans, Vrex, Solarians, we all brought something to the table." Kralzoth considered the offer. A senior position on a new type of Confederation vessel, continuing to work with the beings he had come to respect despite their differences, or perhaps because of them. It was an intriguing prospect. "What's the ship called?" he asked finally. Donovan grinned. "That's the best part. In honor of our first mission together, they're letting us name it the GCS Unexpected." "Fitting," Vexinar commented, "though I still don't understand the human obsession with naming inanimate objects." "It's not about the object," Reed explained. "It's about what it represents. The unexpected isn't just a ship, it's an idea, that sometimes the most effective approach is the one no one sees coming. And if there's one thing we've learned," Donovan added, "it's that the galaxy is full of the unexpected. Might as well embrace it." As if in response, the crystalline Vorlax in the containment field pulsed with a new pattern of light, one they hadn't observed before. All four turned to watch as the entity reshaped itself, forming what appeared to be a crude approximation of a Confederation insignia. "Case in point," Reed murmured, her eyes wide. "It's learning, adapting, but not to fight. To communicate." "Well, I'll be damned," Donovan said softly. "Maybe there's hope for all of us yet." Kralzoth's mandibles clicked in the Arthurian expression of thoughtful agreement. "The universe is full of surprises. Some terrifying, some wondrous. The trick, I think, is knowing which is which." "And when you can't tell the difference?" Vexinar asked. "That," said Donovan with a smile, "is when you call in the Throwbacks." Back in the mess hall of the newly commissioned GCS Unexpected, now several months into their mission, Kralzoth was once again regaling a group of junior officers with tales of the Vorlax encounter. The story had grown somewhat in the telling, as stories tend to do, but the essential truth remained. And then Captain Donovan says, "Sometimes the old ways are the best ways," and throws what is essentially space garbage at a crystalline alien species about to wipe out 12 million colonists. The gathered officers, a mix of species from across the Confederation, laughed appreciatively, though Kralzoth noticed the human officers laughed the loudest. There was something about human humor that still eluded him, a certain appreciation for the absurd that seemed uniquely their own. Captain Donovan himself entered the mess hall in time to catch the end of the story, shaking his head with a rueful smile. "Still telling that one, Kral? You're going to give the junior officers the wrong idea about proper tactical procedures." "On the contrary," Kralzoth replied, "I'm giving them exactly the right idea, that sometimes the proper procedure is whatever works." "A dangerous philosophy," Donovan noted, though his tone was light. "But an effective one," countered Vexinar, joining them with a tray of synthesized nutrients. "The Vorlax haven't launched a major offensive since Tau Ceti." "Not in their original form, anyway," Donovan agreed, though intelligence reports suggest they're evolving new strategies, smaller groups, more targeted approaches, learning from their defeat. "As are we," Kralzoth said. "Dr. Reed's communication protocols with the isolated Vorlax entities are showing promising results. We might actually achieve meaningful dialogue within a year." "Imagine that," Donovan mused. "From mortal enemies to conversation partners. My great-grandfather would never have believed it." "Why not?" asked one of the junior officers, a young Solarian whose translucent skin flushed with embarrassment when all eyes turned to her. "Because humans," Donovan explained kindly, "have a long history of assuming that anything different from us is inherently threatening. It's taken us thousands of years and nearly as many wars to start questioning that assumption." "And yet," Kralzoth observed, "when humanity finally reached the stars and encountered truly alien life forms, your first instinct wasn't to conquer or destroy, but to understand, to communicate, to form the Confederation." "We had good teachers," Donovan replied with a smile. "Our own history showed us where aggression and fear led. We decided to try something different." "And when that doesn't work?" Vexinar asked, always the pragmatist. Donovan's expression turned serious. "Then we remember every hard lesson our species ever learned about warfare, from the first cave dweller who picked up a rock to the last admiral who launched a relativistic kill vehicle. We remember, we adapt, and if necessary, we fight with everything we've got. Because that's the other thing about humans. We're really, really good at surviving." A comfortable silence fell over the group, each being contemplating the curious paradox that was humanity, a species capable of both tremendous violence and profound compassion, often in the same moment. "You know," Kralzoth said finally, "when I first met humans, I thought you were the most terrifying species in the galaxy. Your capacity for violence, your unpredictability, your willingness to employ tactics that other species had long abandoned as barbaric. And now? Donovan asked. Kralzoth's mandibles clicked in the Arthurian expression of fond amusement. Now I think you're still the most terrifying species in the galaxy. But I'm very glad you're on our side. The feeling, Donovan assured him, is entirely mutual. As the conversation drifted to other topics, Kralzoth reflected on how much had changed since that first day in the armory, when he had tried to shock Lieutenant Vexenar with tales of human warfare. He had thought he understood humans then, had thought their primitive methods and chaotic approach to combat were simply signs of an underdeveloped species. Now he knew better. Humans weren't primitive, they were pragmatic. They weren't chaotic, they were adaptive. And most importantly, they weren't just warriors, they were survivors. They remembered every technique, every weapon, every strategy they had ever developed, not because they relished violence, but because they understood, at a bone-deep level, that survival sometimes required it. And yet, paradoxically, it was that same drive to survive that had ultimately led humans to seek cooperation rather than conquest when they reached the stars. They had looked at their own bloody history and chosen a different path forward, while still keeping the hard-won knowledge of their past. The unexpected would soon be deploying to investigate a new astronomical phenomenon at the edge of known space, something the sensors couldn't quite categorize, potentially a new form of life, or perhaps a natural phenomenon they had never encountered before. Whatever it was, Kralzoth knew that between the Arthurian capacity for analysis, the Solarian technical expertise, the Vrex resilience, and yes, the human adaptability, they would find a way to understand it. And if understanding failed, if communication proved impossible, if the unknown proved hostile, well, Captain Donovan still kept that old sonic disruptor in his quarters, right next to a glass case containing what he claimed was a genuine 20th century combat knife. Just in case. Because that, Kralzoth had learned, was the essence of humanity. Hope for the best, prepare for the worst, and never ever forget how to fight when necessary. It was a philosophy that had carried humans from cave dwellings to the stars, through countless wars and disasters and near extinctions. It wasn't always pretty, and it wasn't always kind, but it was undeniably effective. And in a galaxy full of the unexpected, effectiveness was what mattered most. And,